So before we begin our official class, I think we're recording, but so when we redid our driveway, the city of Winter Springs decided after we had finished it that they needed to put their sidewalk, because of their own regulations, through it. And so they tore up our new driveway and then re-poured their sidewalk so that it would be correct. That's the local code, apparently.
Oh.
So that's why it ended up the way it ended up. Yeah. So it would have been nice if they told us that in advance, especially since they decided to start tearing it up the week before Rosh Hashanah, which was, thank you. But especially, when you submit plans and let people know that you're doing things, it's nice to get that in advance. Is that anyone telling me there's a problem? No. Video unavailable? Oh. Hold on a second. Sometimes these things get unplugged when there are meetings. Looks like there's video. Hold on a second. See, I told you my tech support was there for me.
Yeah.
I guess that means that she can hear us, but she can't see us.
Try that.
No.
When you get a kidney replaced, they don't take out another kidney. My friend just got a kidney.
Well, no. Technology is what technology is. So if it's not recording, oh well. Maybe people can still hear, and we'll take it from there. All right.
No, he can't hear. He's got it on his phone. He can't hear.
No, you're not getting anything?
So she just.
I mean, everything's plugged in. It's showing up over here. The little sound bar is recording. That's so unusual. No, it wouldn't be recording at all if I had no connection. All right, you know what? Forget technology. Let's study. All right, technology is just not doing good things for me today. All right, so we've created the entire world. We have recreated the entire world after the disasters. And now we are finally getting down to people whom we're going to care about. Now, the difference here, of course, is that we had been caring about occasional people. We'd care about Adam. We'd care about Eve. We'd care about Noah. We mentioned a few people for a sentence here and there that seemed nice, but there was no continuity. I mean, don't get me wrong. We got all the begat, so-and-so gave birth to so-and-so and all of that. But the continuity of character, of personality that we were going to be interested in and whom God would continue to have an ongoing relationship with a line, that hasn't happened for the entire 20 generations that we've now passed. And now we're going to get to somebody where it is going to happen. And that somebody is Avram, all right, or Abraham and Sarah, as you probably know them better. So we're going to be looking a little bit at an episode in their life that is, again, not often one of the main focus, but which reflects a little bit more on what God is trying to build with this guy and with his family. And so with that as our introduction, we're going to turn to page 74, and we're in chapter 13. Yep. So the story so far, right? Lech, Lecha, Abraham or Avram, I'll go back and forth between them and apologize for that in advance, was living up in Haran, up in what would now be called Syria, most likely, or maybe the border with Iraq. And God told him, head on down to the land of Canaan, right? This is a new place, not any place you or your family's ever been, and I'm going to make you a great nation there. And Avram goes, along with Sarai, along with Sarah, his wife, and along with one other guy, Lot, right? Lot. So this is Abraham's nephew, basically, and he comes with them, as well as everyone else that had already gathered into Abraham's household while they were living up north. And they come down, and then there's a famine. And then they end up going down to Egypt in order to survive the famine, and now they come back up. Everyone with us? All right, so they're coming back up from Egypt after the famine. And as they come back, this was after, as we've talked about in previous times, the whole "you're my sister" shenanigans, where Abraham passed off Sarah as a sister, which got her noticed by people and Abraham not murdered. And when it got resolved, Abraham ended up with treasure. He ended up with many parting gifts as he was shown to the door of the land of Egypt. So Abraham's coming back very wealthy and still alive. So that's the best of both worlds. We good? All right. So chapter 13, take it away.
From Egypt, Abram went up to Negev with his wife and all that he possessed, together with Lot. Now, Abram was very rich in cattle, silver, and gold, and he proceeded by stages from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been formerly, between Bethel and Ai, the site of the altar that he had built there at first. And there, Abram invoked the Lord by name.
All right, so he's coming back up, going in stages. People argue because, you got this much cattle and livestock and all of that, you can't just move as fast as if it was just you on a donkey. And they end up back in the more or less the center of the country, sort of in the Judean hills country. I don't know. No, that was something else. All right. So anyway, back up in the hill country, and Abraham gets back to what he had been doing, which is talking to God, right? Invoking God by name, building altars to God, and traveling around the country. We're good? We're good.
Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support them staying together, for their possessions were so great that they could not remain together.
All right, and you're asking, well, wait a minute, what's so bad about having a lot of stuff, right? Well, here's the problem.
There was quarreling between the herdsmen of Avram's cattle and those of Lot's cattle. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were then dwelling in the land.
Okay, so we're getting a view here now. We've got the land of Israel. Here's the general borders. That's the Golan. It's probably a little bit larger than it needs to be. And we're basically sort of here in the middle of the country. And you might be thinking, okay, so we've got a lot. Maybe we need this much territory. Well, the problem is there are other groups living in the country. So Abraham and Lot can't just spread out completely and easily as one large group with all of this livestock. And so now comes the hard part of saying goodbye. That's where we are. So they're there, and because of these other residents in the country, they don't have free reign to just take over a huge chunk. Yep, yeah.
How did Lot get so many riches?
He didn't do anything except nepotism. Right? He is. So it's both gifts from Abraham as well as the general blessing of being in Abraham's household. Right? Everything Abraham does seems to be blessed. And therefore, those who are with him seem to also be blessed. We see this even more explicitly when we find Jacob visiting Laban's house. And everything goes great for Laban as long as Jacob is living there. And Laban realizes that all of his blessing is because of Jacob. And that's why you get into the whole argument about why he shouldn't have ever run away, at least from Laban's point of view.
Okay, this is before Isaac and Ishmael.
Yes, we got no kids yet.
Okay, but so Lot would be his heir.
Indeed, he would. At this point, with Abraham having no heir of his own, because he hasn't had an Ishmael, he hasn't had Isaac, at this point, the biblical inheritance laws would say that you would go from, if Abraham were to die right now, you'd go back up to his father. His father's not alive. Right. You would go to one of his brothers, also not alive, go to his brother's children, Lot. Right? So technically, Lot would be his heir at this point in the story.
So was Lot his nephew?
Lot was his nephew. Okay, yes, okay. Exactly. We all good?
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes no sense.
Avram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, between my herdsmen and yours, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Let us separate. If you go north, I will go south. If you go south, I will go north." Lot looked about him and saw how well watered was the whole plain of the Jordan, all of it. This was before the Lord had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, all the way to Zoar, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward.
Okay, so let's see what we got going on here. We've got them, like I said, situated more or less in the center of what we would call the modern state of Israel. And what is Avram's suggestion?
Separate.
We're going to separate, right? Because if we
left, I go right.
exactly pick a direction. Now, notice the magnanimity. Notice how nice he's being.
Yeah.
To basically give Lot first pick. He's saying, look, we're standing here. If you go north, I'll move south, right? So that there's room between us. If you go to the east, I'll go to the west. So there's room between us. And then our herds are not going to be fighting over, a hill to graze for the grass and pasture lands and all of those things. And water, of course, which is very important in the land of Israel. So he's giving him an option to pick a direction. And what does Lot pick?
He picks
Good.
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay, he picks the area of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's greener. Now, anybody here who's been to Israel or seen pictures of Israel understands Jordan River is like the only consistent water supply that is above ground in the entire area. And so, of course, the Jordan River is going to look good compared to the Judean hills. And it's, a place where he thought to go. Now, this was more of an agricultural area rather than a pastoral area. And as we find out later on, Lot ends up being an urban dweller by the time he gets down there. But at this point, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, although we get the hint of this is before it was destroyed. We get the idea here that he's going to go down into this plain where Sodom and Gomorrah exist because it looks prettier, right? It looks very, very fertile, which is also the financial equivalent of taking the biggest slice of cake when two are on offer. The old joke: if you're a guest and someone puts out, cookies, and there's like one big cookie and one small cookie, and there are two of you, which cookie are you supposed to take? You take the largest one. Well, let's just say that's not the usual preference in most etiquette manuals, right? Most etiquette manuals say you take the one closest to you, or you take the smaller one, right? You never want to be the one who takes the last one, because then you just look greedy. Even though you want it, you show restraint, right? Because showing restraint is part of how you show respect and courtesy to the other people around you. I know those are bizarre terms in the modern world of restraint, respect, courtesy, crazy talk. But we see here a lot making a decision, which is metaphorically the equivalent of taking the bigger cookie.
It seems to be the same logic that Eve is following when she looks at the tree and says she sees the tree as good. It's a delight to the eyes. It's desirable.
Yep.
So he's allowing his eyes to lead him.
And what do we know about what our eyes lead us to? It's usually not a good thing, right? For those of you that make the recitation of the Kriyat Shema, the full Shema, and Ve'ahavta and other paragraphs, part of your daily routine, the final paragraph, give or take your translation, says, that we wear the tzitzit so we don't go whoring after what our eyes see. Because what your eyes sees, the heart wants. And that's pretty much what we have going on here as well. All right, so.
It's a little funny thing. In the Hebrew version, it says, Abraham says, if you go left, I'll go right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go right, I'll go left.
Yes.
In the translation, it's north and south.
Yes, because biblically, their maps were oriented differently than ours, right? In our map, like I drew here, you have north at the top, right? And in the biblical concept, your orientation was towards the east, right? And so left was north and right was south, because you were facing towards the rising sun. That was your default map position. If I was going to draw this map like a biblical map, it would have been drawn like that, with the Jordan and everything seen up to the top of it. That was the way they oriented themselves, because it makes sense. For most of the time when you're out doing stuff, unless you're a sailor looking for stars, you're in the day, and the sun is your primary benchmark. And so you wake up in the morning to begin your journey. What do? You stand up, you look and say, there's the sun. Which way am I going today? Am I going left? Am I going right? Or am I going forward? Am I going backwards? Right? And that was how you would orient yourself before you would journey each day. So yes, we've changed since we've moved to a navigational system built off the North Pole and magnet compasses and all of that good stuff. But they were oriented with with east as being in front of them. And that gives you a left and right that are north and south.
We learned something new.
We do, or rather we forgot something old and we had to relearn it. But, all of us have GPS now, so we don't even care what north, south, east, and west. We just need to know in 500 feet, turn right.
That's right.
And that's as far as we're thinking ahead.
Unless we lose the phone.
Well, if you lose the
Then we
phone,
have
then
no
you
idea
find a
where
friendly
we are.
policeman and say, can you please take me home?
He looks at his GPS.
Absolutely. What's your address? He'll plug it in. You'll be fine. All right. So let's go ahead and just finish off this little section.
So thus they parted from each other. Abram remained in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the plain, pitching his tents near Sodom. Now the inhabitants of Sodom were very wicked sinners against the Lord. And the Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, raise your eyes and look out from where you are to the north and south, to the east and west. For I give all the land that you see to you and your offspring forever.
Wait a minute. Hold on. So first of all, let me just point out, again, we'll see this more when we get to the story of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, that Lot pitches his tents near Sodom in that region. But eventually, of course, he's going to end up in a house in the town. Right? You may think, oh, I'm going to go near the bad place, but I won't go in. You're going in eventually, right? You start that process of going forward.
Well, how do you know it's bad? He's a newcomer to that place, isn't he?
Indeed he is. Indeed he is. So he would not necessarily know it was bad, which is precisely why judging where to go only on what it looks like materially is such a problem. Without checking out the reputation of the area, without checking out what he would know about the people in the area, he's making a very reckless move in deciding to put himself over in their area. It's the same way that I'm sure most of you, if you were looking for a neighborhood, you would do a little more research about the neighborhood than just driving up and down and saying, oh, I like these houses. You'd want to find out what's the area like, what are the schools like, what is the local services like, do they have a good city council, what's the access, and you'd ask questions. Lot's not asking any questions. So we, due to the omniscient narrator, know that this is a really, really bad choice. But Lot should have at least asked a few more questions. But it doesn't really matter, because look at what God's promising in this blessing to Abraham now that Lot's out of the way. He's telling Abraham, you get it all. Right. Abraham just said, Lot, you can take any piece you want. And Lot said, okay, I'll take this. And God said, yeah, he's not getting anything. Your descendants are getting all of it. You didn't give away anything to Lot. Right? Abraham thinks that he is being very generous, very beneficent. God's coming along to let him know Lot's not actually going to get any of this. Okay, it's nice that you want to share with your nephew, and that is wonderful and to your credit. But in the long term, the blessing is yours, and the blessing is for your descendants. So yeah, Lot may be enjoying it temporarily, but it's not permanently going to be attached to Lot. Okay, so a little bit more.
I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, then your offspring can also be counted. Up, walk about the land, through its length and its breadth, for I give it to you. And Avram moved his tent and came to dwell at the terebinths of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built an altar there to the Lord.
Right, which, as you notice, he's doing exactly what he promised. Because Lot went this way, what does Abraham do? He goes that way, right, to Hebron, which is a little bit further to the west than it is to the east. So he is indeed going the opposite direction, just as he had promised Lot that he would do. And this whole idea of getting up and traveling around the land, this is in Jewish ideas an idea of kinyan, of how you take possession of property. Right? You buy a new house. What do? You go and look in every room. Right? You explore your property. That's part of what it means to now become the owner of a piece of property, and this is what Abraham's doing. Okay, but I want to come back to our little throwaway line because those are sometimes the richest bits of text. We're going to go back at verse 13. All right, and the people of Sodom were very wicked sinners. So one of the things that I love about the JPS translation, and also hate, is that they like to make compound words out of words that are not compounds in the text. Now, sometimes that's because they're noticing that the two similar words, the two synonyms, are used in order to double up emphasis. And they're putting that into their translation. But sometimes it obscures potential differences. So it doesn't actually say that the people of Sodom were wicked sinners. It says that they were wicked people, right? That there was ra'im and v'chata'im, and that they were sinners. So they are evil peoples, and they are sinners against God a whole lot, right? Me'od. So that weird structure of what's the difference is where our commentators are going to start off, right? What does it mean to be evils? What does it mean to be sinners? And what do you mean very much, right? I mean, isn't like a sin, just a sin, right? If I break the law, aren't I just breaking the law? How do I break the law very much? And so that's how they're going to have to try and pull apart these different pieces of this one verse in verse 13. Everyone see where we're looking in the text? Everyone got the handout? We're starting off with the quotes from Rashi, where he breaks down each of these three different parts, right? The Ra'im, the Chata'im, and Me'od Ladonai, right? Sinning against God.
Okay. Rashi's explanation is the opposite of Onkelos.
Read the first
Oh, you want to
three.
read it?
Yeah, because we got the Ra'im.
The Ra'im is wicked in their persons.
Okay, so again, nice, beautiful, short Rashi, which could have used a few more words. He's saying, what does it mean to be Ra'im? What does it mean that they are wicked people? This means that they are doing wickedness with their bodies, right? That they are bodily committing transgressions, that they are using their bodies in some way that is immoral.
Not inherently. I picked that up inherently.
No. He's saying that, well, look at the next one, and then we'll see the contrast.
The Chatayim is they were sinners with their wealth.
Right? So some people commit sins with their pocketbook. Other people commit sins with their bodies. Right? And the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, they do them both. Right? They do them both. Right? So some people, you just can't keep them away from, licentious, immoral sexual behavior. But they are perfectly fine on the whole pocketbook sin issues. And other people have no problem, keeping their belt on. But when it comes time to how they either make money or give money, then they are committing transgressions. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah, they're doing them both, says Rashi.
Was that 50%?
Was that 50? I don't know exactly what their daily schedule was. Of how many hours they gave to each of the sins.
And we have not yet received the Torah with the list of what are good and bad. So
and
they know.
We're going to come back to that, right? Wait a minute, what do you mean? How are they
How do
sinning?
they know?
Okay, so for those of you who were here on Saturday, we talked about for Parashat Noah, the Noahide laws. The idea that there are 7 laws that are incumbent upon all humanity, not just Jews. And that's sort of what this is now hinting at as well. And we're going to get back to Noahide laws in just a minute when we get to Radak's interpretation.
And then there's Ma'od Ladonai, before the Lord, exceedingly. That is, they knew their master, Lord, and yet intentionally rebelled against him.
All right, so what does it mean to do this before God a lot? So one interpretation would be they did it a lot, right? Which is more or less what we have in verse 13 in our translation. But what Rashi is saying, based on, as we'll see some of the other texts, is that to sin a lot means to sin knowing that you are rebelling against God. Right? There are some people that sin because they can't really control themselves, right? We talked about before this idea of discipline, this idea of self-control and, not taking the biggest cookie. And some people, if they see the biggest cookie, they're taking the biggest cookie, right? They're not taking the biggest cookie because they want to be rude. They're taking the biggest cookie because once they see it, they just, impulse control is not their thing. Right? They're impulsive. It's not right. And we're not saying that this excuses the behavior, but we understand where it came from within them. Other people are taking the biggest cookie because they want to really just shove the middle finger in your face. Right? They're taking the biggest cookie to show you that they're taking the biggest cookie. right? And what are you going to do about it, right? They're taking the biggest cookie to be a jerk, not because they can't control their impulses, but because they're controlling them specifically in a way that is counter to what is good and what is right. And apparently, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, according to Rashi and the commentaries he's basing this off, they knew that there was a God. They knew there were rules. They knew how the world was supposed to be working, and they knew that what they were doing wasn't, and they were happy to raise that middle finger to God and just say, you know what? We're going to do it anyway, and we hope that you're unhappy with it. Right? That's what it is to rebel against God. It's not to just make a mistake and not be able to control yourself, or out of ignorance not know that you weren't supposed to do something. It's to know what is right and to choose to do the opposite, specifically to spite the one who created everything. Right? That is what we're talking about for the Sodom and Gomorrah people. Now, why would the Midrashim that Rashi is quoting here be so emphatic about the behavior of these people? About this level of their depravity and rebelliousness? Because how else do you explain their destruction?
Right.
Right? If they're going to get nuked, then they had to earn it. And we know that because eventually Abraham's going to have this long conversation with God about doing justice. So the Midrash is very important. It feels very importantly that we, when we're first introduced to these folks, know from the beginning just how bad they are, so that we are not completely surprised by the nuclear option that God perpetrates against them. And so we need to see just exactly the extent of their problems. And now we have sort of the Cliff Note version, right? Wicked in body, wicked in money, and they do it to rebel. But what does that actually mean? Well, that's where some of our other commentaries are going to chime in.
And that's Rashi's explanation is the opposite of Onkelos' explanation.
Onkelos was an Aramaic translation of the Torah,
who translated wicked as with their money, sinners as with their persons.
Right, so he basically translated as being the inverse. And in the Talmud, you do see both versions.
You might ask, how did Rashi know that it means as he explained it? The answer is, Yosef said, how can I do such a great wickedness, Ra?
Right.
Speaking of sinning with his person.
Okay, so when was Joseph saying, I can't do this evil thing? Potiphar's wife, right? She is saying, hey, let's go do a sin with our body. And he said, I can't do that, right? Because it would be evil. So because he used the term evil while rejecting doing a sin with the body, therefore using the term evil refers to doing sins with the body.
That's what Na'im here means, sinning with their person.
Exactly.
And it's also written in Devarim about a hired worker. You shall give him his wage on his day, lest there be sin upon you. And this involves money.
Right? So in the book of Deuteronomy and Devarim, when it says, don't withhold the wages from your worker, it says that if you do withhold the wages, it's a chet. It doesn't use the word ra, it doesn't use the word wicked, it uses the term for sin. And since that's dealing with money, so too when Rashi is saying that the word chataim is dealing with money for the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Following the logic? Yeah, that's very neat, I think. Very tidy. All right. Now, Sifra is the earlier midrash upon which Rashi is basing this whole me'od phrase of this being something against God, doing it against God, exceedingly or a lot. So what does this mean?
If you do not hearken to me, what is the intent of this? One who knows his master, but willfully rebels.
Right? It's not just don't listen, but you don't listen to me, says God. Right? To not listen is one thing, but to not listen dispointedly to God is a different level of rebellious behavior. Onward.
And similarly in Breshit it says, and the people of Sodom were evil and sinful to the Lord exceedingly. Why need to the Lord be stated? The intent is they knew their master and willfully rebelled against him.
All right, so the Sifra is unpacking what Rashi had packed for us, which is this idea that the phrase, and they were wicked and they were sinning a lot, would have been a perfectly fine sentence. Why add in the phrase against God? Why add in the phrase, to God or towards God, depending upon how you want to translate Ladonai? And the answer the Sifra gives is because that was part of the sin. That was the poke in the eye of God saying, we're against you, is why that phrase gets added into our verse. Because like we've said many, many, many of the times in our discussions, if the Torah could have said it differently, you have to ask why it said it this way. Why did it include the phrase to God? It was to tell us that their sinning was not just a question of impulse control, it was a question of rebelliousness. Make sense? Oh, of course it does.
Yeah.
All right, now back to the Radak.
The word la'im describes their attitude to God, whereas the word hatayim describes their attitude to fellow human beings.
All right, boom. We've now got a different interpretation, right? The first few texts that we were dealing with were all dealing with that whole with your body, with your money, and against God. Now we're getting a different interpretation where it is against God is being ra'ah, right, is this wickedness, and against each other is the chata'im, are the sins, right? That is another matrix that you can use to describe types of sins. And that matrix is, I sinned against God or I sinned against other people. And indeed, that's one of the phrases that's used in the Yom Kippur liturgy, that there are sins between ourselves and our Creator, and there are sins between us and Chavero, and our fellow beings. And that's what Radak is picking up on here, is that this double language for sinning must be talking about sins between humans and God and sins between humans and humans. Good? Good. Now he's going to give us a little bit more explanation of what that looks like.
They ignored all the 7 Noahide laws, including idolatry, and the other 6 laws which deal with interpersonal relations.
All right, so he's spelling out for something which is rather interesting, which is really the Noahide laws are heavily slanted towards how humans act towards other humans, or in some cases living creatures, in terms of ripping them apart. There's very little in the Noahide laws that expects a person to behave in a certain way towards God. And that is what he's trying to emphasize here. Is yes, they were offensive to God, but maybe we could excuse that because after all, they're idolaters, but they were also mean to each other, which is a different type of problem, right? Because in Judaism, we've sort of come to expect that not everyone around the world is going to recognize God the same way we do. But we do sort of have an understanding that, well, hopefully they won't reject God, but also that they won't reject each other, that they'll at least be decent to one another. And that seems to be what Radak is zeroing in on here, is the idea that they weren't even nice to one another. And that is a huge, huge problem.
And the Torah, underlining the severity of these people's wickedness, adds the word me'od, very much so. They did not bother to conceal their evil deeds, but carried them out in the open, brazenly. All
right, so what is the exceedingly, how do you sin hard, right? How do you I'm going to really sin today? By not even pretending to hide it, right? Most people will at least have the common courtesy of sneaking in and stealing something when you're not looking. This person will walk up and take it right in front of you and say, what are you going to do about it? Right? That is the brazenness of this me'od, right? That's a sinning hard, man. You are really, really going for it there. Make sense? Okay, again, the fact that Radak has a different matrix than the text based off the Rashi commentary shouldn't surprise us. It just shows us that from these few little words, there are many different things that are all correct that we can learn about this. Now, we may not be able to exactly say what the people of Sodom and Gomorrah were doing, but we've got a pretty good idea of the ballpark in which they are playing. And it's not a pretty thing. All right, the Chizkuni is going to give us a whole different, well, not a whole different, but he's going to spell out more of what it means to have the interpersonal crime for which Sodom and Gomorrah was known for.
Right, because it said the people of Sodom behaved wickedly. This is spelled out in greater detail in Ezekiel, where it says it did not support the poor or the destitute.
All right, so Chizkuni brings to our attention that when we say they were behaving badly to one another, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were stealing from one each other or murdering or even fighting in the streets. That may just mean, similar to what Ezekiel says, that they were just not good to the poor and needy. Right? That is a wickedness in and of itself. And if you're not sure about that, well, we have a quote from Pirkei Avot, the great compilation of teachings of our sages.
There are 4 temperaments among men.
Now, they mean people, of course.
Oh, the one who says, what is mine, what is yours, that's an average temperament.
All right, so that's sort of like the normal person. Says, look, I've got my book, you've got your book, we're good, right? Yours is yours, mine is mine, we're done. However,
there are some who say that it's the temperament of Sodom.
Oh, well, wait a minute. For me to say this is my book and that's your book and we're good, that's a sodomite behavior? What's so bad about that?
Because one says, what's mine?
No, but
Oh,
no, I'm waiting on that answer.
Oh, that's not the answer.
We got three other people here that are either better or worse. But why would anyone complain about someone who simply says, look, one of those cars out there is mine. I got the keys to it. One of the cars out there is yours. You got your keys to it. That's your car. This is my car. We're good.
You have your family, and I see you have just this much little piece of bread, and I have myself, and I have all this food, and what's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. I don't care if you're gonna starve to death.
Right. Exactly. I'm not going to take away from you, but what I have no obligation or feeling of moral compulsion to share with anyone else ever. Right? It's mine. So why should you tell me that I have an obligation to share that with someone else in need?
I
Right?
worked really hard.
I worked
to get all
hard for
this.
It doesn't even come down to
Work
how hard you worked or where it came from.
Fine.
It's simply
It's
mine.
mine.
It's simply mine. Right? It's like the seagulls in Finding Nemo. Mine. Right? It's just mine. And what's mine is mine.
So what he's saying is, in some cases, I could call that's the average person. But
Right.
some people would say that's Saddam.
Right. Exactly. If you
Depends
are
how you look
in
at
a
it.
regular situation, you know, good neighbors and everybody's doing fine and you've got plenty, your neighbor's got plenty, then remembering that your neighbor's property is their property and your property is your property, generally speaking, that's a normal way to behave. On the other hand, if your neighbor's house just burnt down, you don't just say, wow, that's too bad.
That's too bad.
And then shut the door and go to bed. Right? That is the behavior of Sodom. Right? That is the sodomite behavior. Now we do have three other temperaments as well.
Yeah. There's one who says, what is mine is yours, and what is yours is mine.
Right? Flipping things back and forth.
This is allowed.
Right? This is a person who's just confusing things and being stupid and deliberately obnoxious.
What is mine is yours, and what is yours is yours. That's a pious person.
That's a chassid, right? That is somebody who is going saying, look, everything I have can be yours and everything you have is yours. I only want to give. That, yes, that's very nice, very pious. That is not expected to be the norm.
No. And what is yours is mine, and what is mine is mine. That's a wicked person.
Okay, that's straight up greed, right? I've got mine and I want yours. Right? That's straight up greed and selfishness. Now notice that's the term that's used in Pirkei Avot as being wicked, but that's not the term that's being used to describe the people of Sodom. Right? It would have been very easy for the Pirkei Avot to say, and that's what the Sodomites were like, right? They were greedy, rapacious, stealing from everyone. That's what Sodom was like. But instead, the sages say, no. The people who say what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, that is, at least occasionally, a Sodomite attitude. Even though the word wicked is the word that's from our verse, whereas the other isn't there. So why would our sages have zeroed in on that first behavior rather than the last one, given that the last one was already preloaded with the phrase wicked?
Okay.
Right? Why tag what's mine is mine and yours is yours as sodomite rather than actually tag the wicked one as being the sodomite behavior?
I'm gonna guess that there's something about a kind of apathy of, what's yours is yours, mine is mine, that kind of apathy or dislocation of responsibility for a community or a family
Right.
or
Divisive.
Right. When wickedness shows up wearing a black hat and twirling a mustache, no one has a problem identifying it, right? The person who says, I'm going to take yours and all of this is mine. We all go, boo, hiss, villain. But the person who shows up and says, well, I'm just not really responsible for anyone except for myself. I'm just struggling to get by. I'm not really going to get involved. Most of us will not peg that and say wicked. And the rabbis want us to, and they want us to understand that for a crime like that, your whole city could be obliterated.
Yeah.
Because what happens when there is a crisis in the city? right? If everybody has that attitude, what's mine is mine and yours is yours, and now there's a problem, right? There's a famine, there's a flood, there's bandit attacks, there's a wicked ruler demanding something from you. Well, if you're not willing to actually work together, then your city is going to fall apart. Right? It may not be blasted by God like Sodom and Gomorrah were, but if you're all just in your own little bubble, just thinking about yourself, just thinking about what you have, and saying that's good enough, you are going to end up the same way the Sodomites ended up. So they need to use the term Sodom to drive home the danger of that particular attitude, because it's not coming with the black hat and the twirly mustache. And therefore, we need to have it highlighted and brought to our attention more strongly. All right, this is not the last thing they have to say about these people. So, onward.
Our rabbis were taught the people of Sodom have no share in the world to come.
Which is like one of the biggest things you can say to condemn a group, right? It's one thing to say you're wicked, but you'll go through a period of, temporary punishment, and then you'll have a share in the world to come. That's like what most of us should expect. It's another thing to say you're wicked, you're going to be dead, punished, and then obliterated. That's a whole different category that the rabbis will talk about for only a select few people in all of human history. And why the people of Sodom?
Because it says in Genesis, the people of Sodom were wicked and sinners. That is, wicked in this world and sinners in the world to come.
Meaning, even in the world to come, they will be considered sinners and therefore will have no portion of it. So this is their interpretation of that double synonymous language of between wicked and sinners. Now, again, we've now have our third version of how to interpret those double synonyms, but the rabbis are trying to use this as emphasis to say that whatever crime the Sodomites did, it was worthy that they shouldn't even exist in the world to come after having received their just deserts. So what could it possibly have been?
Our rabbis were taught the men of Sodom became overbearing only on account of the wealth that the Holy One bestowed upon them.
Right? Remember, we said they were living in the good land. Right? They had that wonderful green pasture area. So, of course, they were blessed, and they took that blessing and became corrupt through it. Onward.
Because what's written concerning them in Job, the earth out of which comes forth bread is under its surface turned up as if it were with fire.
Right? Think of the explosion destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. It had this beautiful place where the bread would come out, and then it was obliterated, and it was as though the entire world was flipped upside down with the destruction of the city.
Her stones are the place where the sapphire comes, and golden dust is also there.
Right? So, but it was a place of wealth, a place of gems and gold, and yet it was obliterated.
And on the path which no bird of prey knows, and which the vulture's eye has not yet surveyed.
Right? It is now completely abandoned and forlorn. Right? Even the vultures don't go there.
So they said, since our land supplies us with sufficient bread, why should we permit travelers who come only to diminish our money? Come, let us make the law of free trade forgotten in our land. As it is said.
This is still from Job, by the way.
They opened up a shaft far from where men live, in places forgotten by wayfarers, destitute of men, far removed.
Right. So what the Talmud is reading here is the idea that the Sodomites said, look, we've been blessed. Look at what we've got. Let's make sure we keep it, and no one else is allowed to have it. Right? Why should we allow anyone else? Because if anyone else comes, our share will be diminished. Right? That's the general attitude. Is that if there are four brothers, remember we talked about with Noah, if there are three brothers, we talked about with Noah, and you birth a fourth, the other three are now getting less of the share of the world because you're going to divide the inheritance by one more person. Right? Here comes one more mouth to feed. Here comes one more person to take away from us. Here comes one more person that our wealth will be distributed to them. Let's just make sure that they're not allowed in. Indeed, how do we see the people of Sodom treating visitors when we get into the next parasha? The angels that show up? Not so good. Right? They are not welcoming hosts. They look at any stranger as being a threat and someone that needs to be either killed or at least dominated. Which was really the sexual act that they were most known for in modern society, was really just about dominance more than the sex, of saying we're on top and you are subjugated to us. And that is what the Talmud is zeroing in on here, is the Sodomites seem to just not want to share, right? We've got ours, and if you're not part of us, you don't count, right? You lose. You don't count as part of our calculation. Our morality, our caring does not extend to you. You're outside of us, right? You're a them. That clear? Maybe? All right. Midrash Tanchuma.
Rav Judah bar Rav Shalom the Levite said in the name of Rav Yochanan bar Nachman, when Amraphel and his associates came to fight with the Sodomites.
Right. This is chapter 14, by the way. Do please keep reading on your own. This is when you have the battle of the 5 kings versus the 4 kings, where these other kings for whom the Sodomites and Gomorrites and others were tributaries to them. When the Sodomites rebelled against those kings, see, they rebelled against human kings too. The other kings came and wanted to collect. And there was this big war. The Sodomite kings and others ended up running and hiding in the tar pits. Abraham had to then come and rescue Lot from the attacking kings. Everyone have a vague memory of that story? Yeah, this is the one that doesn't get a lot of press.
So Abraham went out to fight against them because they had captured Lot.
He's saving his nephew one more time.
So he killed the kings and they fled. Just as it's written in Genesis, now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled.
All right, so not only did the kings that Abraham was fighting against fly away, but when the original war happened, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah also ran away, right? They didn't stick with their communities and fight. Notice the captive was Lot, the visitor. The captive wasn't actually the king of that city. So the kings went, oh, man, we started this little war. We better go hide and let all of the other people get, taken as captives and destroyed, which, again, is showing their attitude in general of such loyalty to one another. But they also got away. And that's what the Midrash is going to now wonder about. Like, wait a minute, the kings escaped? The Sodom and Gomorrah kings escaped when Lot got taken prisoner? That doesn't seem fair, does it? Okay, so here's what they're going to put into the mind of Abraham.
So Abraham began reflecting. The kings came to fight with the Sodomites. So the kings fell, but those of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Thus it is stated, and those who remained fled to the mountain. Perhaps you will say there were worthy ones among them.
I mean, maybe the reason they survived is because they were decent people somehow, or at least some decent people among them.
The Holy One said to him in Job, should he flee from the iron weapon, the bow of brass shall pass through him. He draws it out, and it comes out of his body. Utter darkness is laid up in reserve for him, and unfanned fire shall consume him. It shall be bad for a survivor in his tent.
All right, all those things are worse.
Yeah.
Right, you escape the sword, but the bow will still get you. You'll pull it out. There's darkness. There's an unfanned fire, which means the fire will burn longer, which means you'll suffer more, rather than a hot fire, which would burn you up quicker. I know, great imagery. And the survivor in the tent will also be consumed. So we have survivors here, right? We have, and what's going on?
What is the meaning of shall consume the survivor in his tent? That even if a single survivor is left, the evil of evil shall consume the survivor in his tent.
Right? If you think you've escaped God's justice, wait, it will catch up to you, is what he's trying to say.
Which survivor? This is Lot's wife, Edith. The name Edith, Ed, suggests the Hebrew Ed, which means witness. And indeed, as a pillar of salt, Edith did become a witness to all who saw her.
Okay, so even the person you thought was going to get out, Lot's wife, who apparently wasn't such a great person, even her, she couldn't quite escape the punishment, right? She was left.
People named their child Edith.
Yeah,
Well, you can understand the term aid as a witness, as a positive.
Right.
Someone can be a witness for God in a positive light. And then you can also have a witness in the negative way.
Right.
I don't think this midrash is universally understood as the only way to look at the word Edith. But this is one way to look at that. And also it's to answer the question, in case you ever wondered, what was Lot's wife's name?
Yeah.
According to the midrash, her name was Edith.
Edith.
but it's nowhere in the.
Wow.
No, it's not in the text
Okay.
itself. This is a midrashic name.
Oh,
Okay.
All right.
She's a witness.
She's a witness. Yeah, just it's, everyone can serve as an example. Some people serve as bad examples, right, of what not to do. And this is an example that you can't escape forever. Right? You can hide in tar pits. You can even try and leave, but if you're bad, eventually it will catch up to you. It may not happen instantly, which is what Abraham was wondering in the first, but eventually it will catch up to you. All right. So we're going to end on a little bit more of a positive note of what exactly we are supposed to do and what we're supposed to look for in our life. So we're going to begin with Avot de Rabbi Natan, which is another one of the early collections of rabbinic teachings.
And in Pirkei Avot it says, love the creatures.
Right? Ohevet habriot, right?
So this teaches that a person should love the creatures and not hate the creatures.
Meaning?
And so we find in the generation of the dispersion,
Which is the phrase that's used for the people who were in the Tower of Babel,
that from their loving one another, the Holy One, blessed be He, did not wish to destroy them from the world.
right? Why didn't God simply bomb the Tower of Babel?
Oh,
Because even though they were against him,
they were cooperating with each other.
they were for each other. They were cooperating. They loved each other. They wanted to be a great nation together. So they had that going for them. So God did not nuke them.
Instead, God dispersed them to the four winds of the world.
Right? They still had to be stopped, but God found a different way to stop them.
But the people of Sodom, since they hated one another, the Holy One, blessed be He, destroyed them both from this world and from the world to come. So it teaches us that from their hatred for each other, the Holy One, blessed be He, destroyed them from this world and the world to come.
All right. So what he's trying to say here is that if you have to choose, you should at least love each other. Right? Yes, you should also be loving God. But loving each other is, in and of itself, an incredible and powerful act, because it will protect you from the worst effects that might happen, even if you're doing other things wrong. At least if you're doing them in a loving way with each other, you're a step above than the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Because the only way to truly be destroyed is to not only do horrible things, but to also hate each other while doing it.
Does the hatred also tie into the destruction of the second temple?
The sinat chinam, the idea of hatred among people, is a recurring theme throughout rabbinic literature as being one of the major problems in a society. Yes.
Right.
And it's one that is a recurring problem in societies, unfortunately. And then we're going to finally finish off with a bit from Yoma in the Talmud.
From the curse of the wicked, you infer a blessing for the righteous.
So what this principle is trying to say is that if ever you see, cursed is ba 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 ba, you should also see the inverse, meaning that blessed would be the person who doesn't do ba 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 ba, right? So by reading curses, you should also look for the blessing, and the blessing will be for the inverse of whatever the curse is directed at. We're going to get a concrete example.
Yeah, because it's written, and the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful to God. And then it's written, and God said to Abram, after that Lot had separated from him, God then blesses him.
All right, so notice if you look back in our text, right, we finish with verse 13, they're wicked, they're horrible, blah, blah, blah. And verse 14, God says, raise your eyes and everything belongs to you. So immediately after the sentence about how horrible the people of Sodom and Gomorrah were, we get a blessing for Abram. And that is what the Talmud is trying to tell us to notice, that these two paragraphs are not just randomly juxtaposed. It's trying to say, if you're not like them, there's going to be a blessing for you. Right? So this is not just a cautionary tale of don't be like the people of Sodom and Gomorrah because you don't want to get bombed. It's if you're definitely not like them, there's even a blessing that goes beyond not being destroyed. And that we can see by these two verses coming next to each other in the Torah. And then onward with their further interpretation.
Right. Rabbi Elazar said, even for one righteous person, an entire world is created, because it's stated, and God saw light that it was good. And good means nothing other than righteous, as it's stated, say of the righteous that he is good.
Right? So God is willing to create the entire world, even for just one person. Right? One good person makes the whole world worthwhile.
Wow.
Right?
Right.
One good person makes the whole world worthwhile.
How come they needed 10?
And how come they needed 10?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't about the world, it was about the city. Certainly God would not have destroyed the world just because of the evil of Sodom and Gomorrah, but that doesn't mean that God couldn't destroy Sodom and Gomorrah for the evil of Sodom and Gomorrah. if there had been 10 people in Sodom and Gomorrah, there would have at least been a community, a minyan, that from which could have influenced the rest of the town and eventually given it the potential for turning back towards a better way of living. But they didn't have that. Right? Even if you add up all of Lot and his family, assuming we want to count them all as good, which is an open discussion, definitely open discussion, we didn't have 10 people even in his household that could have been used as that nucleus around which to begin a transformation of the cities. So Sodom and Gomorrah, they could be written off. Any other questions, comments?
What's things evil?
According to the Midrash, yes. According to the Midrash,
Where did they come up? How?
because she was a witness, she was an aide. Yeah, from the Hebrew word for witness. Yes.
I mean, on the mountaintops, where you have two groups on the mountains?
Yes. The right at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. Yes.
Is that a universal principle? When you see a curse, you can infer a blessing?
Yes, it is. That's what the rabbis are arguing, is that when you see a curse, you should be able to infer a blessing.
That's gonna be throughout the whole Torah.
That's the rabbi's principle in this part of Yoma. Yes.
Wow.
Pure.
One kind in this room.